Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today on April 29th of 2022 to speak about, free speech. Your ability and my ability to be able to have a conversation, especially if that is taking place online. This is, of course, all coming up because of the Disinformation Governance Board that has been announced by the Biden-Harris administration and taking a situation that has already been topsy-turvy based on Elon Musk taking over Twitter. It has added even more confusion and added even more hype and agitation to the internet world. But there is a question at the heart of everything that is being said and everything that is being proposed that I think needs a little more clarity. We're hearing a lot of people tossing around ideas about restraining speech and having absolute speech. But what is absolutist free speech? It's a conversation that really doesn't happen. And I'm going to go into that to some detail so that you'll understand, what are we really talking about? Is this something that we should be afraid of having, or is it something that we should embrace? Very few are actually talking about that. But before we get started, we do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out to hear your voice about the issues that matter to us on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow. Because we believe in your right to free speech. It's not just an American value, it is everyone's right to be able to speak freely. And we hope that this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will join us as we speak to people from around the world, hearing their tweets, their chats, and their phone calls about the issues that matter to you. But we're talking a lot about free speech today. In fact, this week, we've probably heard more people mention the term free speech and absolutist free speech than most people have probably heard in the last several years. Why is that? Well, it's because this is important. The basis of free speech determines just about everything else. And once we can understand what we can and cannot say, well, that's where all thought comes from. That's where all discussion comes from. And being able to exchange ideas, we're able to create inventions, able to create entertainment, we're able to just live our lives. It's a very important thing. But when it's online, it takes on a new life, it would seem, because people are able to exchange ideas. Well, some of those ideas may be that Bigfoot is alive or that the earth is flat. Then again, some of these ideas may be that Joe Biden is a bad president, that President Obama was less than exemplary in his time in office. Or it could even be that some would say that President Trump was a mean person and that he said mean things. Should we be able to say these things? Is this something that we should be able to allow to be on the internet? In fact, where would we draw the line? What does that really mean? Let's look into this. Now, before we get to that, I want to mention, why are we having this conversation in the first place? The real simple answer to that is Joe Biden is not doing well. He's got a problem. This is a poll that you can see. It's from the YouGov, and it came out today, April 29th. And this is in reference to who would you like to see running the Democratic Party of the United States. Now, I'm not a Democrat. I am a conservative Republican, but I took the poll anyway to see what the results were. And it's very telling, because it starts off with the majority of people who have taken the poll, and this is an unofficial poll, but 82% took the poll when I took it and were Democrats. They voted for the Democratic Party. And going on, what we see is that, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Democratic Party? 54% of the people who took this poll, 82% of which are people who voted for Democrats, do not have a favorable opinion of the Democratic Party. There's another question in here I think that's even better. Do you think Joe Biden has shaped the Democratic Party for better or worse? 51% of those taking the poll, 82% of which voted for Democrats, say it's worse off now than before. When asked about the future of the Democratic Party, 63% said that they had a negative opinion of the Democratic Party. When asked about Joe Biden running in 2024 to be reelected as president, 53% said they would not vote for Joe Biden. Again, I say it often, but 82% of the people taking this poll vote Democrat. 53% of everyone taking the poll says they would not vote for Biden in 2024. In fact, the poll goes on to show who amongst the Democrats that are well known at this moment would people vote for in 2024. 48% said someone completely different than the list of the best known names in the Democratic Party today. Kamala Harris, who currently is sitting in office as the first woman of color as a vice president, has a 5% approval. 5% of people thinks that she should be the 2024 Democratic nominee for the presidency as a vice president, a currently sitting one. With that understood, we can understand there's a problem that Democrats are facing right now. A pretty big problem indeed. They are not well liked. So Joe Biden needs to do something because people are speaking about their displeasure with the Biden-Harris administration online, and it's getting a lot of traction. There are a lot of people paying attention to that. So when Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter, he decided that he was going to remove some of the restrictions that are very well known and cited by Twitter against conservatives and Republicans. And many people have now said, well, we need to put in some kind of restriction on Elon Musk, on the future of Twitter, to restrict certain people's voices, to maintain censorship, in fact, to increase censorship, as Senator Blumenthal has suggested in the past. Now, people are looking at this and saying, well, Joe Biden said that he wants to get rid of Section 230, that he's always wanted to make reforms. And so we had to look back in time and we have to tell you, well, yes, Joe Biden has been against Section 230. He has wanted to reform it. Of course, it's not that far in the past as some in the news media and the press secretary Jen Psaki would like you to believe. It's actually from 2020. See, in 2020, according to a January 2020 article by Reason.com, we see that Biden and Facebook have been feuding for months, as Reason has previously covered. In October 2019, a letter to Facebook, Biden's campaign called on the social media site to reject political ads containing, quote, previously debunked content, end quote, like a Trump campaign ad linking Biden and his son Hunter to corruption in the Ukraine. By the way, the corruption they're speaking about is Joe Biden speaking publicly that he used the power of the vice presidency to remove a attorney general for Ukraine that was investigating his son, who was working at a Ukrainian gas company. So there's that debunked idea. But going forward, shortly afterwards, Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, said the company's policies were, quote, grounded in Facebook's fundamental belief in free expression, respect for democratic process, and the belief that in mature democracies with a free press, political speech is already arguably the most scrutinized speech there is, end quote. You may believe that Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, believes in free expression. but there are hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, who would disagree with that and many of his actions. But that's what he said in 2020. Now, we do know that this was something that was very controversial. So we know that in 2020, Joe Biden was saying that he wanted to completely remove Section 230 and take away all of the protections that Twitter, Google, Facebook, the internet giants are able to enjoy. And once he got into elected office, the Biden administration then decided in 2021 to continue to support Section 230. We know that as a fact, according to a Politico article on November of 2021, even though Joe Biden said he's against Section 230, even though he said he wants to outright repeal it completely, even though he was upset about it, when it no longer applied to him, when it no longer applied to Joe Biden's political prospects and no longer affected his son, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden didn't really care, and he wasn't moving forward, or apparently was not moving forward to make any reforms. He was perfectly fine to allow the status quo, and under his direction, the United States government supported Section 230. That leads us to the fact checks of today, where many people have been saying, and Newsweek decided to investigate the claim that this was all done last minute, that Elon Musk buying Twitter caused the Biden administration and Democrats to move forward and suddenly put in this draconian organization, the Disinformation Governance Board. According to Newsweek, on April 27th of 2022, they found this to be false. They say, well, Joe Biden said in 2020, so he's been looking to do this behind the scenes, even though no one in the news media was covering it, even though there were no leaks of this information from a presidential administration known for its leaks of information. They even go on to note that the Biden administration, much like the Donald Trump administration, had made public statements about getting rid of Section 230. But the Trump administration actually took steps to narrow the ability of Section 230 to protect Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and other internet companies. And he had issued an executive order to make sure that would be the case in May of 2020. And one of the first things that the Biden administration did, rather than supporting the restrictions from the Trump administration on Section 230, rather than living up to the promise and his stated goal of trying to repeal Section 230 or to further restrict it, or even to maintain the restrictions established by the Trump administration, Joe Biden revoked the Trump executive order without any comment. He lifted the restrictions that were placed on Twitter, Google, and the internet overlords. That comes from Newsweek itself. Somewhere in the middle of 2021, after defending the Section 230, after making sure that restrictions on Section 230 were removed, we are told by the Biden administration that somewhere in there, they decided that they were going to try and reform Section 230, that they were going to try and supplement it by adding a disinformation governance board, and that they were going to pick an individual, Nina Jankowicz, who would be able to lead this charge. Now, this is very important because Nina Jankowicz, as noted by the Daily Mail, states she opposes the First Amendment because she thinks it's bad for marginalized communities and called Elon Musk a free speech absolutist. This is inferring that free speech absolutism is a negative. That is the way that it has been framed by the head of the Disinformation Governance Board, which from this point forward, I'm going to call the Ministry of Truth. The head of the Ministry of Truth wants you to believe that the First Amendment is bad for minorities, that this is somehow for being able to speak, especially online. This is bad. You need to have restrictions on free speech. You can't just speak because it's bad for women, it's bad for blacks and Hispanics and other minorities. That's a very odd way of looking at it, that people cannot speak because, and it's important to note, being able to speak is a function of being able to think. And the more that you are able to think, the more that you are able to speak. That's a truism. That's what language is. Taking that thought from in our head and putting it out so other people can hear it. And if we're restricting what people can say, we're in fact restricting what people can think. So to say that we're going to restrict what can be said to protect minorities doesn't sound like protection. It sounds like authoritarian overreach. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks that. In fact, Glenn Greenwald, who is a left-leaning journalist, a very important left-leaning journalist who created The Atlantic, that the Biden administration casually announced today, and this is on April 28th, that the Department of Homeland Security, a domestic security agency, has created a, quote, disinformation, quote, board is indescribably dystopian and chilling. That Democrats think this is good and normal tells you all you need to know about them. It's a pretty strong statement from a left-leaning individual. There is no one who confuses Glenn Greenwald with a Republican or a conservative, because it is true that Nina Jankowicz on April 25th of 2022 says, "I shudder to think about if free speech absolutists were taking over more platforms, what would look like for what that would look like for the marginalized communities, which are already shouldering disproportionate amounts of abuse." So to be black and to be on the internet is to be the target of abuse? Is that real? No one else gets abused, just blacks, Hispanics, and women. What about Republicans, conservative, individuals that have unpopular ideas, whatever that idea may be? You mean they're not targets? Or are you saying that when people target, say, BLM, because BLM is accused of possibly abusing the grants that they received, the $66 million that they received in donations, and have used that to buy mansions for some of its leaders, that's abuse. Is that what she's trying to equate? That's attacking black people by questioning the misuse of funds, allegedly, by BLM. Is that it? Is it that when people are saying Kamala Harris hasn't shown up at the southern border and has been ineffective as the southern border czar, as we see 500% increases in the number of illegal aliens entering the United States, is that about race? Is that because she's a woman? Is that what she's trying to protect? Is that what Nina is trying to protect here? Because isn't that a political critique of an elected official? And a critique about the effectiveness and efficiency of that elected official doing their job? Well, obviously, it depends on which way you want to look at it. If you're trying to silence someone, like Nina is suggesting, well, then that's based on race and sexism. But if you're looking at it from any other point of view, it's a critique of a politician doing their job. So all of this brings us to the question, what is free speech absolutism? According to Nina, it is a dangerous item. To listen to many people on many of the blue checks on Twitter, it's something dangerous. It's something that's going to hurt blacks, and it's going to hurt women, and it's going to hurt Hispanics and other minorities. What is this absolutism? Merriam-Webster defines absolutism as an absolute standard or principle to stand on a principle without any deviation. That's what an absolutism is. Okay. And when we look at the absolutist over history, and looking at this from the First American Encyclopedia, a First Amendment Encyclopedia from MTSU, according to Timothy O'Neill, absolutists believe that the wording, quote, Congress shall make no law in the First Amendment means that neither the federal government nor the state governments may pass laws that abridge the individual rights of religion, speech, press, and association. Also, to that end, these rights should never defer to other social values, that this is above everything. Your right to be able to speak, to say what you think, is higher than everything. Justice Hugo Black believed that it was an absolute, with some minor deviation. Justice William O. Douglas did not believe that. He believed that all speech should be allowed, no matter what that speech is. And that's where we get the difference. Now, to give you an idea, I am a near absolutist. I believe that you can say anything that you want to say, except if it incites violence or if it is an absolutely known lie. So, if you want to say that Bigfoot is real, fantastic. You can say that, and you should be able to say that on any medium, anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States at the very least. And we are open to be able to debate that if we want to. That's freedom of speech. The question comes up, well, what about hate speech? Should that be allowed? There is no such thing as hate speech. Again, I am a Black Hispanic, and I want to make it very clear. There is no such thing as hate speech. There is just speech. You may not like the speech. You may even hate the speech that is being said. But it is just speech, unless it incites violence or is absolutely proven to be false. Something that we know. If you look at me and say, well, Michael, you are a white man because of your political ideology, that is factually incorrect. That should not be allowed, and that can, depending on the way it's being stated, can fall under libel or slander. And that's why we have these laws, because it is a known falsehood. You can't do that, at least in a malicious manner. As we have said on this channel many, many times, the First Amendment, free speech, is meant to protect the language you don't like. Not the language that you do like. That doesn't need protection. It's the language you don't like. And that applies to each and every person, because the language that I do like, you may not. So that's how we protect everyone's free speech. And that's why I am a near absolutist. Everything except that which incites violence or is factually, absolutely, empirically incorrect should not be allowed. I know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not agree with me on that. So when we say that Elon Musk is an absolutist on free speech, when I say I am a near absolutist on free speech, this is what we're talking about. But is that right? Is that the correct thing to have? Let's go all the way back in time. Let's go back to the founding of America and the creation of the First Amendment and the Constitution. And this is from the government itself. It's governmentinfo.gov. And looking at the First Amendment, religion, free speech, etc., looking at page 1020, freedom of expression, speech, and the press, I want to go back to June 8th of 1789. And this is what the First Amendment was envisioned to be able to say. According to Madison, the people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments. and the freedom of the press as one of the great bulwarks of liberty shall be inviolable. That means that the original intent in 1789 was that you can say anything, you can print anything, and the press could not be restricted at all. That's free speech absolutism right there. But that was perhaps a little too much, and the draft that Madison had put forth had to be adjusted. And so, in looking at this, the second view that was taken by the Congress at that time said, let's make some adjustments, and they said it should read, the freedom of speech and of the press and the right of the people peaceably to assemble and consult for the common good and to apply to the government for redress of grievances shall not be infringed. Now, what they did at this point is they introduced the right, the absolute right to be able to protest, to be able to seek amends from the government itself. That was a lot better. That included a few more things that may have been missed, like the ability to protest and to seek remedy from the government. But then we came to what wound up being the third version. Quote, that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and consult for their common good and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, this final language is essentially the language that was accepted, but in each case, in each version, it is being stated that speech is absolute, that whether it is in a written format or whether it is in a spoken format, what we want to say as individuals, as American citizens, cannot be diluted, restricted, or otherwise impeached by the government. That is what they repeatedly wrote. That is what they focused on and did not change. That is the intent from 1789 to 2022. That is the core understanding of free speech and what is absolute free speech. And at no point did they retreat from that. Obviously, this caused some controversy. And that controversy was pretty widespread and pretty immediate as well. And Blackstone came up and he decided to make a comment on this in speaking about this. And he says, quote, the liberty of the press is indeed essential to the nature of a free state. But this consists of laying no previous restraints on publications and not in freedom to insure for criminal matter when published. Every free man has an undoubted right to lay what sentiments he pleases before the public. To forbid this is to destroy the freedom of the press. But if he publishes what is improper, mischievous, or illegal, he must take the consequences of his own temerity. To subject the press to the restrictive power of a licenser was, as was formerly done both before and since the Revolution, is to subject all freedom of the sentiment to the prejudices of one man and make him the arbitrary and infallible judge of all controverted points in learning, religion, and government. What does that mean? This is, again, page 1021. What is that? Well, it's saying that if we restrict the freedom of the press, if we restrict the freedom of the individual to be able to speak, we are in effect creating a new king. We are creating a new monarchy within our government. And it will ultimately come to one individual who has absolute power and who will decide on matters of religion and of speech, and therefore our lives, because speech is thought, that they will be able to restrict the freedom without doubt they restrict the freedom of every individual that has such a restriction. To say that someone is an absolutist or a near absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment, especially free speech, that isn't negative. That is never a negative thing. That is someone who is saying they believe in the absolute freedom for you to think. They believe in your freedom to explore different ideas and to take them to wherever they lead you and to have that discussion about it. Because there is nothing that advances without first having a thought and to express it to someone else and perhaps even to have a challenge on it. In fact, we've heard that from Professor Jordan Peterson has made similar statements. But it is a truism of life. The more thoughts that we are able to convey from our head, from our minds, to other individuals, the more we are able to explore a field of thought, whether it's art and making a movie, a song, a picture, a novel, or scientific exploration, going to determine that the Earth is not the center of the world, to find out that there are planets and stars that exist in the universe, to be able to send people from Earth to the moon. That all starts with a conversation. That all starts with speech, free speech. And we know that going back to Copernicus, that wasn't always possible. That to speak out, as Da Vinci also learned, to speak out and to say something that was not popular could get you punished because speech wasn't free back then. And it came at a great cost. And that's why in America, you can have that freedom of speech. You can debate ideas. You can explore. And because we can do that freely without restriction, we now have cell phones, we have the internet, we have advances that past civilizations couldn't even dream of. The only people who are fearful of free speech, absolute free speech, or even near absolute free speech, are people who want to restrict you. They want to restrict what you think, and they want to restrict what you say, because that will restrict what you do. What's the worst thing that could happen if free speech is allowed to exist? Well, someone may say, I don't like you. They may say that they find you unflattering. They may even say things that are very vicious about you. And how does that change from where we are today? I have been told, in person and online, I've been told that I am a white supremacist. I've been called a misogynist. I've been called just about every ist and phobe that I have heard of, that anyone can conceive of, and probably a few that I don't even know what they mean. Did that change anything? Does that stop me from doing anything? No, that's certain people's opinion. That has nothing to do with my ability to speak. It didn't stop me from speaking. That's an intimidation tactic. In fact, that can be, and in some cases has been, a crime. But why do I need the government to protect me? All I need to do is either to speak more and those individuals get drowned out or corrected or proven to be false or biased, or I can ignore them. That's why we have block buttons. That's why we can just turn the page, click the button, and go on to something else if we wish to. We are not required to read the things that we don't like. We're not required to consume the content we don't agree with. You can be a libertarian. You can be part of the Green Party. You can be a socialist, or you can be a Republican and conservative. That's up to you. But you can't be any of those things unless you can speak freely. And that is an absolute freedom. So when we hear that Nina Jankowicz is trying to say that this is somehow damaging, it's dangerous to blacks and women and Hispanics and minorities, how? If it weren't for the people who had the freedom of speech, back in the 1800s, the abolitionists, if it weren't for them, if they were not speaking up and saying slavery should not exist, who would stop them? Who would stop slavery? How would it end if it were not for people saying the unpopular thing, saying the thing that was being restricted, that some people didn't want to hear, that we need to end slavery? If they could not say that, how would it have ever happened? How would women have ever gotten the vote if they didn't speak, if they were not guaranteed free speech, and men who also supported them to be able to get the vote? If they did not have the ability to speak, if they did not have the freedom to say something that people did not want to hear, would women be able to have property today? Would they be able to vote? Would they have the freedoms and rights that we have now? That is intrinsic in an absolute free speech. When I hear Nina say, oh, this is going to harm marginalized communities, first of all, I'm not marginalized. I may be black, I am Hispanic, but that doesn't mean I'm marginalized. I'm a male and I'm straight. That doesn't mean I'm marginalized. That's her speech trying to detract from my life. And my answer is my speech back to her. I'm not marginalized. I'm as good as anyone else, better than some, not as good as others. And I would never want them to take away my free speech or that of anyone else, because without that free speech, slavery would still exist. Women would not be able to vote. Gays would not be able to get married. And so many other aspects of our lives could not happen unless we absolutely were able to speak freely. Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist. When you hear people say Michael Voss is a free speech absolutist, that's not a negative. That's not an insult. And it's never meant to be. It has never, since 1789, when our Constitution and the amendments were being written down, it has never been conceived of as being a negative. It is the greatest, I believe perhaps the greatest compliment you can give someone, that they are willing to share with you absolutely and freely the thoughts that they have, and to debate that, to investigate that, to explore that to its fullest extent without restriction and fear coming from a government or a group of individuals. To stand in front of people who may well disagree, just like they did with slavery, just like they did with women getting a vote, just like they did with transgenders and with gays being able to marry and to live. Just like those ideas took brave individuals to stand up and speak out when no one else was listening, when many people were trying to suppress them. They have to stand up and speak, and I believe in that. Because without that absolute free speech, we lose all of those things. The Disinformation Governance Board is not looking to enhance your ability to speak and explore ideas. They're looking to restrict it. Nina Jackowitz isn't trying to protect minorities. She's trying to put them in a box. She's trying to effectively enslave them by denying them the freedom that the First Amendment guarantees, that millions died to be able to ensure. Is Elon Musk going to be the best thing for the internet ever? Maybe, maybe not. Will Twitter become the most free internet social media site ever? Maybe, maybe not. But what's more important is that we have the ability to find out, that we have the ability to choose to participate or not, that we have the ability to say whether we like or dislike any aspect of that company and the politicians who may or may not agree with any of this process. Is being an absolutist a bad thing? Well, it depends on what you're being absolute about. Is it a bad thing to be an absolutist about free speech? I don't think so. You may not like that. You may not agree with that. But that doesn't change that it is important. Because even if you don't like it, even if you don't agree, if you can't say anything about it, and if we're not absolutely free, you can't, how does that affect your life? But I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this. I look forward to hearing what you think about absolute free speech. Were you aware of what that was? Did this help you understand the terms and to put it into perspective? I would like to hear what you think about the Disinformation Governance Board. And tell me, do you think all of this is going to be positive for America or negative? I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and I look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we do our live stream and we ask you what you think about the issues that are affecting us all across the world. I thank you, and I hope you have a great day.